So good evening, everybody. Lynn Lewis, part of the League of Women Voters Dakota County leadership team. And I'd just like to welcome you tonight on this update on how voting and election policy changes were made by the 2023 legislature and how they'll affect Dakota County. We're really pleased to have our Dakota County Director of Elections here, Michelle Blue, and she's going to share her time and her expertise with us tonight. So she'll review the upcoming 2024 election calendar and how we might become involved in what's going on with elections this year. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight. Michelle Blue has over 20 years of experience in county government administration. She has a master's degree in public administration and recently moved to Minnesota from Utah, and is happy to be closer to her extended family. In Utah, she was the elections director for Salt Lake County, where her experience included dealing with ranked choice voting, as well as all mail-in ballot elections. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you and give you the rest of the evening.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully so. Hopefully somebody yell at me or if not. So anyway, thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. This is a topic that's obviously near and dear to my heart. So very happy to speak to you. I guess I'm off and running already and forgot to start my slides. So let me see if I can get that running. All right. Hopefully people can see.
Yes, we can see.
Hey, thank you so much. Okay. All right. Well, I will dive in. My name is Michelle Blue. Again, I am very happy to be with you this evening. Please feel free to stop me as you go. I think there's some wonderful people monitoring the chat. I'll also be happy to take questions as we go. I like you enough to not make you listen to me drone on for an hour, so please feel free to interrupt with questions. I love them. You'll hear me as we go talk about what are my goals as the director of Dakota County elections, ensuring that our elections are safe, accessible, and transparent. I have been here for almost a year now, so I'll get into that. I just wanted to share a quick agenda. I'd like to introduce myself and our team. I will spend a little bit of time talking about the presidential nomination primary because it is really on our heels right now. I'll talk about other election related events in 2024, and then the new election legislation and how that also helps us continue to be safe, accessible, and transparent. And then finally, how you can get involved, and that will always be my plug, is trying to get more of you to come in and see what we do. So Dakota County elections, we're a pretty small team. I feel like, considering the fact that we are the third largest county. So there are 8 of us on the team. As I said, I just came to the job in February of last year. So I'm 11 months on the job now. I am thrilled to be here. As was mentioned, I moved here with my family from Salt Lake City, Utah. The political landscape is quite different. They are, when they vote in person, they vote on machines, not on paper ballots, and it's a vote by mail state. But just as a matter of my own background, in 2006, the state of Utah introduced voting machines, and we had never done that before. And I thought, well, that's something I want to get to know a little bit more. And I became an election judge, and I spent 16 years as an election judge before the county clerk at the time had called and asked if I would come work for her. So so that's how I ended up as a full-time elections worker. And then if you may have heard me mention that my husband, he grew up in Iowa and has always wanted to move back to the Midwest. So it was a perfect fit for me to end up back here in Dakota County. So that's how I ended up here. And our team, I'm really proud of how diverse our team is. So we have, of 8 of us, 75% of us have elections experience in other counties. And then 88% of us have elections experience that we had before we even joined this team. So we have a really diverse experience, people from counties, not just myself, but from counties all over the country, all over the state, where we've seen really great ideas of things that have worked well. And so that's something I'm really proud of. I do want to mention in Dakota County, we have this really heavy reliance on schools and cities and towns. So we are one piece of the puzzle for elections. There's no question about that, but we're only one piece of it. We do need the clerks of cities and towns to schedule all the election judges. They schedule all the polling places. They really do a tremendous amount of work. So, so please think of that as like the multi-legged stool that we can't do it without them. And then from a political landscape perspective, I just pulled this. So we have currently, as of this morning, 282,292 voters that reside in 142 precincts. We have 22 cities, 12 townships, and 11 school districts. And one of the things that I just want you to think about as I'm discussing different elections is that I wish in my perfect dream world, these geographical divisions or municipal divisions, they would all line up perfectly, and they don't. So as an example, we have cities in our county that also go into other counties. We have school districts that spread 3 counties. We have school districts that span sometimes 12 or 15 cities. And so there's a lot of really complicated things when we talk about running elections that I just wanted to put that out there and make sure we know that's part of some of the complications when we are running things is when you go to vote, you may live in a precinct where you live in one school district and your neighbors or other people in that precinct live in a different school district. And so that's part of the fun that we deal with in elections. And then the last really fun thing is that we, by law, are subject to hold special elections when they are called by a municipal body. So we held 6 elections in 2023, and a lot of people get surprised when they hear me say that and think, oh, you must not do anything in those odd numbered years. But yeah, we had 6 elections in 2023 and there were only supposed to be 2. So we had lots of surprises that kept us quite busy. And there are currently 4 elections scheduled for 2024. So we are all knocking on wood that it will stay at 4 elections. So that is my team. And I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the presidential nomination primary. So the presidential primary is, you may hear it called that, the presidential primary or the PNP. This was authorized by the legislature in 2016. And I do want to recognize this is a shift for a lot of people. Yes, this was first conducted in 2020, but prior to that, the last time our state had a presidential primary was in 1992. So it was a really long time ago. So hopefully in 2024, folks can get a little bit back to that mindset of 2020. And by law, that occurs on the first Tuesday in March in a presidential election year. A lot of you may know about or be familiar with the caucus system. This is another thing that people say, oh, we must have gone away from caucuses or they don't happen anymore since we have a presidential nomination primary. And that's not true. This is meant to supplement the caucus system, but not replace it. So this is something that I feel like has helped explain the difference. Is I try to remember the PNP decides which candidates will get the delegates at a national convention, and the caucus will decide which Minnesotans will represent their parties at the national convention. So that's one part of what happens at a precinct caucus. And I'll talk about those in a little bit because that's a very important part of our democracy. And then finally, by law, only major political parties may participate. The definition of a major political party is made in state law. Right now there are 3 parties that meet the legal definition of a major political party. That's the Legal Marijuana Now Party, the Republican Party, and the Democratic Farmer Laborer Party. So those 3 parties. This is really different because from other primaries, because each party will have its own ballot. That is really different from other primary elections where you may be used to seeing one column here for this party and one column here for this party, and it says the instructions on the ballot say you can only vote for one party, so you vote for one or the other or more, but you still only vote for one party. The difference here again is that each party has its own ballot. So by law, when a voter either requests an absentee ballot or goes into a polling place to vote, you must declare a political party preference in order to vote, because you have to be given that party ballot in order to vote. So this is something that I do want to make sure that there are no surprises for our voters. By law, also, the party ballot choice that a voter selects, that choice is shared with the chair of the political party that they chose. So I wish that would be kept secret, but it is not. So it is shared with that. So with that party. So I want people to know that before you go into the polling place or before you request an absentee ballot. And a lot of people aren't thinking of that maybe before they even go to the polls of which political party am I going to vote today. But that is something that that is different for this election. So please give that some thought. Moving on. So I don't know if I mentioned this before, but also under state law, the candidates that appear on the ballot appear because they are provided by the chair of the state party. The state party submits a list to the Secretary of State by January 2nd. They are the final arbiter, whatever they put forward as the chair of the party as to who will appear on the ballot, they're the final decision maker. So they put that forward and then we prepare the ballot based on the names they put forward. All 3 parties, as you can see, have chosen to have a write-in candidate appear. And the DFL party has also chosen to have uncommitted appear on their ballot. So those are the choices that they have made, and the ballots are being printed exactly as they've designated, and this has been certified by the Secretary of State. I'm happy to pause here for any questions about the presidential nomination primary. I know it's a lot. And I'll talk a little bit about the rest of the calendar for the year, but as long as we're on the subject of the PNP, absentee voting starts on Friday, January 19th. That's a week from this Friday. So on that date, you can request an absentee ballot either in person at your city hall, at any Dakota County Service Center. You may vote a ballot. You can also request it through the mail or online as well, but that's on our heels.
Michelle, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Um, this is Thana. And you said that you have to declare which ballot you want. Then in your voting history, does it say that you voted in X primary? So that it would identify the party primary that you participated in by your vote.
That is a really good question. It will say that you voted in the presidential nomination primary in 2024. It is supposed to keep your party selection private.
Okay.
That is supposed to be information that is kept private with everybody, from everybody except the chair of that party. I will say the format of public voter information list, that is completely managed by the Secretary of State's office. And so if they were to format, they could format lists, and they do release information for voters throughout the state that we don't necessarily see or know about. I'm certain that they follow the law regarding what information can be released, but yeah, it is supposed to remain private, but that would be part of your voter record for sure.
And
That's
I
a good
see
question.
Marianne, now that I unspotlighted you, I see Marianne has her hand raised. Oh, let's see, Marianne, you still have your mic off. There you
So
go.
I'm not trying to be really weird with this question, but looking at this extensive list of a lot of people that I've never ever heard of, are all of these people, their names, etc., vetted to be real legal names of the people? And I guess the one that caught my interest was based on he who shall not be named, calling certain people vermin. And then I see vermin supreme under the legal party. How are these individuals vetted at the Secretary of State's office?
That's a very good question, and that certainly is valid. I think that's a good question. I would say I don't speak on behalf of the Secretary of State's office. However, the law is very clear that if the state chair of the party submits this name as a candidate, that is supposed to appear on the ballot for that party. And so I think the Secretary of State's office doesn't really take a stand or determine whether or not somebody is a viable candidate. Besides, if it was a candidate that was put forward from the chair of that party, it legally must be placed on the ballot.
And I'll just pop in here. I just Googled Vermin Supreme, and he's actually a real person. He's an American performance artist and activist who has run as a candidate in various local, state, and national elections. So he's a real person. He's 62 years old.
Oh, that is good to know. I will say, as much as I think that I know about elections, there were many names on here that I did not recognize.
But it does look like a pseudonym.
And then Letitia had a question
Yeah,
too.
there's a question in the chat. Do you want to ask it, Letitia, or do you want me to? Well, the question is, how many candidates from each party can send delegates?
And that is a question that I don't know. That my understanding is that is a decision that the party gets to make. That's a really good question. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. So,
Yeah, excuse me, just
yeah, please.
was just thinking that, you have so many names here. So what's the point of of going to elect, to go and getting the ballot if everybody anyway can send delegates? I mean, is there a limit in the number of people whose names could be sent then to the
Oh,
president or whatever?
oh yeah, I see. Yeah, so delegates from each party are bound by the votes that they receive in the PNP. So the delegates that that the state sends, they don't have the ability to support. They are bound by the results of the presidential nomination primary. And that there's a little bit more depth in there as to how many delegates go. I don't, if all of the delegates go to the party that is the top vote getter, or they split them, those are kind of the really more tricky, that gets into the weeds of the caucus system that I'm not as familiar with, but it's a good question.
Okay, so when we vote, it's not clear that, I mean, I just don't know what weight the vote has in this process.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, because if I vote for one of the candidates in these parties and they're a top vote getter, regardless of who the party decides to send to represent Minnesota at the national convention, they still are bound based on the results of this election, if that makes sense. The party doesn't get to overrule that or support a different candidate. The delegates must reflect who won this election, if that makes sense. That's in the law that they
Okay, so
have.
it's the top vote getter that the counties or the county sends to the party.
I believe that is how it works, but that would be a really good thing to confirm at the caucuses. As I said, I don't know quite as much about how that works, besides they are bound by the results of this election to support that candidate.
And because this is statewide, correct?
Yes, this is a statewide
So for the
election.
presidential nomination, only one would go forward. And the parties say that they're bound to give their delegates to that top vote getter?
That is correct. However, yeah, and there's a question in the chat. There is only one candidate may be on the general election ballot. Only one candidate from a party can be on the general election ballot in November. However, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the top vote getter from this state. So this is who the state of Minnesota has decided is the top vote getter. It still is up to, at the national level, the national convention to determine who represents their party for president in November, if that makes sense. So yes, for sure, you can know that only one candidate from these parties will be on the ballot in November. So, and yes, absolutely, your vote counts, because it does bind the parties to that. All right. So that is a great segue into the precinct caucuses. These are scheduled for February 27th. So please get that on your radar now. The location for that is set by the parties. That is set by law. To participate in the caucus, you must be eligible to vote in the next general election. So that would be eligible to vote by November, to live in that precinct, and to generally agree with the principles of the party hosting the caucus. At a caucus, the activities vary, but in general, they will choose volunteers to organize political activities, discuss the ideas that they want the party to support, and then again, choose those delegates who will endorse the candidates when they do go to the national convention. I did want to just put on here the Secretary of State's office. I should broadcast their websites. It's mnvotes.gov. There's a lot of really helpful information on there regarding how to find your polling place, how to look up your voter record, see your sample ballot. But one of the other really awesome things is you can look up and find out where your caucus location is. We do encourage you to participate. It's a really important part of our democratic process. And so yeah, please look up your caucus and find out where to go on February 27th. Like I said, you're welcome to look that up on the Secretary of State's website, or you can call our office as well, and we'll be happy to share that information. Oh, I did see a thing in the chat that 16-year-olds can caucus in the state of Minnesota. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So move on. As I said, there's a lot of really exciting things happening this year. Right now, in addition to getting ready for the presidential nomination primary election on March 5th, we're in the middle of township candidate filing. So if you live in one of the towns in Dakota County, or you know somebody who does, please encourage them to file and run for office. The township election is scheduled for Tuesday, March 12th. That is 1 week after the presidential nomination primary. After that, starting in May, we will have candidate filing for state candidates, county candidates, and city candidates where a primary is possible. That is from May 21st to June 4th. So that is coming up in May. And then, and these dates are also on our website. Then there is a late candidate filing period for those municipalities that elect not to hold a primary election. That begins on July 30th and ends on August 13th, the date of the state primary election. That is August 13th. And then of course, the state general election is on Tuesday, November 5th. So a lot going on. You can find all these dates and more on the Dakota County Elections website. We have the date that absentee ballots will be mailed, the date early voting begins, and a lot of other helpful information. So that's the quick rundown of our very busy year ahead. All right, I'll pivot a little bit to improved access to the ballot box. And of course, this really ties in so nicely with our vision of accessible elections in Dakota County. So you may have heard a lot of these have been in the news, but I'll talk about these. So the first one, the state restored voting rights to felons that are not currently incarcerated. Prior to this year, the law was that all parts of a felony sentence had to be completed before a felon's voting rights were restored. So with this change, approximately 55,000 Minnesotans were newly eligible to vote. That went into effect in July. And so yeah, that absolutely improves access for for our county voters. The next thing on the list is voter pre-registration. This is for 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. If you know anybody, please encourage them to get pre-registered. This is something that I'm a big fan of. A lot of times what happens is you'll have these young folks that register to vote or pre-register, and they might even forget about it and not know about it, because when they do that, it goes into a held status in the state voter registration system. They are not eligible to vote. They cannot go cast a ballot on election day, but they are held still in that held aside in the state voter registration system. And then when they are eligible, they can easily cast their ballot on election day. They don't have to re-register. They don't have to fill out all that time-consuming paperwork. It's really a fabulous system. So please encourage them. They can do that online. They can fill out the form, but please encourage them to get pre-registered if you know folks in this category. The third item on the list is automatic voter registration. So by law, when you engage in a service with the state of Minnesota, sorry, it slipped out. Anyway, if you go to apply for a state service like state benefits, if you're getting a state driver license, there are certain state services, and if they can tell based on all the information that you've submitted to them that you are a US citizen and you are eligible to vote, they will automatically send that information to us so that we can register you to vote. This is something that I'm a big fan of. This is great. There isn't something that people have to think of. I know when I went and got my new driver license, they asked me, do you want to be registered to vote? This will happen automatically now. I do want to say for those people who may not be interested, we will mail a postcard to your home. It says you are in the process of being registered to vote, but you can opt out. Here's who you call, here's who you email. So there definitely is a way for those folks who don't want to be, we can easily back that out and take it, so they take it off the roll so it doesn't happen. So it is automatic, but it doesn't happen for those who don't want to register. And then also the thing I want to stress, this is really safe. This is really secure. It only happens again when our state systems can confirm that they are a US citizen. So we will not ever register somebody unless we can confirm that they are a US citizen. So that is automatic voter registration. Also, in terms of accessibility, what goes into law in 2024 is a push for languages other than English. So right now, by law, everywhere in the state, when you go to vote for a state, county, or federal election, your voting instructions must be translated into the 3 most commonly spoken non-English languages in the state. That is determined by the state demographer. That is currently Spanish, Hmong, and Somali. So I wanted to bring this up. This is a statewide law. Dakota County is a very large state or county, so I don't think this may be happening here, but I do know there are smaller counties, of course, throughout the state. And inevitably what happens is that we do hear people say, well, my goodness, I live in this small corner of the state. I live in rural Minnesota, and I went in and there's voting instructions posted in, again, Spanish, Hmong, and Somali, and they are complying with the state law. Anyway, just acknowledging that we do get our share of complaints about that, and we are complying with the state law that does require that. So that's one of the new requirements. Another thing that you will all see that is different this year that I'm really excited about, when you go in to cast your ballot and you check in on an electronic poll pad, the electronic poll pads are phenomenal because they communicate immediately to the state voter registration system. Which is a great way to enhance security in our elections. But what happens is you check in, that electronic roster has your information already preloaded as a voter in that precinct, and you may actually take your finger or a stylus and sign directly on the poll pad itself. And you wouldn't be before this year, you would take a pen and sign on paper. The electronic signature on the oath is something that people who have disabilities, it really makes it much easier for them to sign. Some people really struggle with the pen method. So that's something that I really like. And then we can capture that signature electronically as well. And then the last thing on the list is the electronic ballots for emergency responders and voters with disabilities. So right now, legally, a voter who is living overseas or is in the military, we can email a ballot to them with instructions on how to return it. That was recently expanded, so voters with disabilities have that option now. And then if an emergency responder were deployed on to respond to a declared emergency, we can also send them a ballot electronically. And so hopefully that allows them additional ways to participate. So I know that was a mouthful. There's a lot that I talked about with voter accessibility there. Any questions at all? Nothing. Wow. Okay.
I'm in love with I'm in love with all the languages and the electronic ballots for email for military overseas, right? That's amazing.
Absolutely. There is no reason that anyone, regardless of if they're overseas, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to still cast their ballot. So we're very excited about that.
I have a question. If you are sending the ballot electronically, do they return it electronically also?
That is a very good question. So that is, although there are federal laws that govern how overseas and military voters may vote, state laws govern how ballots may be returned. Many states in the country do allow voters to electronically return their ballot. Minnesota does not. So that's a very important part of this equation that can make it more difficult for a voter because they cannot return that ballot electronically, even if we could. What other states do is they do a lot of signature comparisons and a lot of other information about, when you return it back, give me the last 4 digits of your social or your driver license number, your date of birth, give me these ways that I can confirm your identity. In the state of Minnesota, this is something I'm not in love with, but they do have to return it by mail so that the physical copy of their ballot can be reviewed with other returned ballots. So that's a good question. That would definitely be on my wish list of things to see changed in the future because it's not always easy for people and military voters stationed overseas to find a way to physically print out a ballot and the way that other states allow. So.
But at least getting it electronically eliminates 50% of that problem.
Exactly. If I don't have to mail a ballot to France and hold my breath of how long it takes to get there, that is a huge hurdle. So very good point.
And then making sure it connects with the right person, you know, that they can access it. Yeah, thank you.
Great point. Absolutely. Okay, the next piece of legislation that I wanted to talk about really gets to the safe elections. This is all of these that I've kind of put into this category for ways that are protecting our election workers and protecting voters. So the first thing is there are now penalties in law for anyone who is trying to interfere with voting activity, or spreads misinformation. The most common example that the legislature provides is somebody who says, like, oh, all of you who live in precinct 13, you're all supposed to go vote down at, you're supposed to go vote at the city hall instead of at the school, and those sorts of things of intentionally spreading that's the example that they've given. I think we've been really fortunate that we haven't seen any of that here in the state, but it's very good that that's something that is taken seriously. The next thing on the list is penalties for intimidation or trying to obstruct the duties or the work of election officials. So that would be somebody working at a precinct, assisting with voting, somebody trying to assist with registering voters, election officials such as myself. The most recent information that I could find is that more than 1 in 5, or over 20% of election workers have expressed that they've experienced some sort of threats or harassment or intimidation of some sort. And so I'm very appreciative of this, that the legislature took this very seriously. We also were very fortunate to have one of our county commissioners actually champion this as well. And so every time, this is really, really sad to think this way, but we do have election judges that have nationwide that have felt fearful for their safety. And I think it's phenomenal that our legislature and our local officials, our local elected officials take this seriously. So that obviously contributes to safe elections. You may have seen, this has been in the news a lot as well, but since 2020, the amount of data requests have skyrocketed. So this is nationwide. This isn't specific to the state of Minnesota, but we do see all over people requesting information under laws like the Freedom of Information Act or the State Data Privacy Data Practices Act. This has not happened in this state, but there are some times that people nationwide have released that information, and it can actually it could reveal how somebody voted. And so I think if you recall the beginning of my presentation, I talked about how you live in a precinct and you might reside in one school district, but there's other people who reside in other school districts. Well, so it is possible, depending on the number of people that reside in that narrow of a group, in that city, in that precinct, in that school district, if we get down to that narrow of a group and you've cast your ballot and you're one of only 2 people, it just, anyway, don't mean to get too granular, but what happens is when they say this person cast their vote in this way, that could potentially expose them. And so this is something really helps increase that safety and the voter protection and voter privacy. Your right to a secret ballot is so sacred. And so anyway, that helps tremendously with that. We now legally have the option to remove a precinct election official for malfeasance or misconduct. Again, nothing at all has happened in this state that that I think rises to the level that this would come into play, but it's very nice that we have that ability. Unfortunately, there have been instances around the country, again, not here, but some bad actors who have intentionally tried to interfere with things, get hired on as an election judge, and then unplug voting machines or try to tamper with them. And it's really, really unfortunate to think that somebody would do that. But now we at least have a legal way to deal with that, were that to happen. The second to last thing on here is that ballot images. Now, this is clear in state law that those are that is protected data. So once you cast your ballot, the image of that ballot remains secret. It is protected. That's another data request that has been made, and it's very nice to be able to tell people when they request to see those ballot images that by law we cannot release them. So that makes our work so much easier. And then the last thing, this goes into what I talked about, that bad actors, again, not here, but nationwide, have done things like releasing hard drives from voting systems and some other things. This really makes it clear in the law that those may not be released or used outside of official election use. So anyway, lots of things on here, but all things that make our elections more safe and secure, and all good stuff. There's a lot on here. Are there any questions at all? All right, I'll keep going then. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time. Somebody will shout at me if I'm out of time.
Sorry, Letitia has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, please.
Yeah, I was just curious whether election officials get any kind of securities, personal security training from the state or from the county.
We do, yes. There are lots of security training. We actually, the Secretary of State's office is hosting one tomorrow. So that's something they really do take very seriously. Yeah. I don't mean to downplay it, because I think these laws are extremely important, but I will say we live in a very good state with very good laws, and I think overall we're very, very fortunate. We also, I've personally had like the Department of Justice has reached out to make sure that we know how serious they take threats against election workers. After 2020, it didn't get off the ground quite as quickly as I had hoped, but it did. It got there, and this is something that finally has a lot of national attention. And yes, there are a lot of resources out there, and I think it's being taken seriously, and we have a lot of resources at our disposal. So it's a good question. All right. So the last big topic that I wanted to speak about with regards to new legislation is the expansion of a lot of the absentee. There's expansion of early voting and the absentee and vote by mail. So so a lot of things here. The first is the option of mail balloting was expanded. So the law used to read that a township of any size and a city with fewer than 400 voters could decide to be an all-mail ballot city, except if they were in the metro area. And that metro area prohibition was recently discarded. So that alone, I believe, allowed for 15 additional municipalities in Dakota County to be eligible to select mail balloting. So that is something. Mail ballot elections are significantly cheaper. In general, they have higher levels of participation because a ballot is mailed to everybody's home, and the odds are that you're going to sit down with your family and talk about the ballot together and mail it back. So that's something that nationwide has seen a lot of success, and I hope that there are municipalities that take advantage of that. We also saw this year the official creation of early voting. I want to clarify, you've probably heard the term early voting here for years. When we talk about early voting as it looks now, that is really not called early voting in the law. And it is not early voting as it is intended. So as an example, and this is exactly how it will be for all of the elections in 2024. So think of how it is today, that if I want to vote early, sometimes you'll hear that referred to as direct balloting. You do still request in person an absentee ballot. So in order to do that, you may notice you go to City Hall or you go to a Dakota County Service Center, you fill out an absentee ballot application. You are still voting absentee. The difference is, yes, in that direct balloting period, you may put your ballot directly into a tabulator, just like you do on election day. So, so that is where people, when you hear us talking about early voting or direct balloting, that's what we mean. The early voting law that went into effect this year, we will not able to, we don't have the technology to make it happen as it's intended until next year or even later. But how that's intended to work is that you would be, is that it would look just like it does on election day. So you go to vote, you're signing in on the roster on the poll pad just like you do on election day, and you put your ballot into a tabulator, and the state voter registration system records immediately that you voted. So official early voting, when that happens again in 2024 or beyond, you'll see that process change. So when I talked about early voting now, the early voting or that direct balloting period, an exciting new change is that went from 7 days prior to election day to 18 days prior to election day. So that's a really, really significant change. So that means starting Friday, February 16th, you will be able to go to, again, a Dakota County Service Center or your City Hall, request an absentee ballot, but then you can also take that ballot and insert it directly into the tabulator. So that's an awesome expansion that helps make elections accessible. There also are expanded office hours for our state general elections. So when we get to this will go into effect in November, but when you see when we get to November, we will have our voting locations open 2 Saturdays before election day and 1 Sunday before election day. And again, that will be for all of our Dakota County Service Centers and the City Halls. So a lot more opportunities for people to vote absentee. The state expanded the definition of healthcare facilities. By law, there's absentee voting must occur at hospitals and nursing homes. And the state expanded that a little bit. And then finally, the last big thing that I wanted to talk about is what I call unofficially the actual permanent absentee. So it used to be that when you signed up for permanent absentee, that meant you were permanently mailed an absentee application. Starting in June of this year, it will change and reflect kind of what the language I think had always intended was that is that now you will automatically get a ballot, not an application. So that will go into effect. That is not in effect now, but for the primary in August and the general election in November, if you or someone you know is on the permanent absentee list, that will go into effect. So a lot there that I know that I talked about. I do see a question in the chat about suspicion and pushback in some areas of Minnesota against regarding all male precincts. Have you felt that in Dakota County? Yes, absolutely. I have felt that. So in the summer, there are 3 cities that currently are mail ballot. They have been for, I think, at least 5 years, all of them. In the summer, we let all of these new municipalities know, hey, this is so exciting. Look, you're eligible to be mail ballot precincts. You'll love it. Your voters will love it. Your pocketbooks love it. Everybody loves it. Nobody took us up on the options on that. So yes, we absolutely still see unfortunately, that has permeated voters everywhere. There is no corner of this country that is not susceptible to some of the misinformation and disinformation about mail balloting. So anyway, mail balloting, I don't mean to go on and on. It is extremely secure. Everyone should have full confidence that a vote cast by mail is accurate. It goes against a real person. It is safe and secure. And it is unfortunate when people perpetuate things that aren't true. But anyway, hopefully changes are on the horizon. Anything can change. And one of the things that affects a city's ability to offer mail balloting is if they have a struggle, honestly, getting election judges, which I will say, I think I'm getting close on my time, but I just wanted to put in the plug here because this is our transparency. Obviously, this is what happened myself for me, as I was like, I don't know what a voting machine is. This is scary. You know, I want to know more about it. And I always encourage people to get involved, come see it for yourself. There are requirements in the law for people who are become election judges. There are election judge trainees you can be once you're 16 years old. And so I think I'll breeze past this, but just, I know this is complicated. Election judges do work for cities, towns, and school districts, but they also work for Dakota County. And so we do have people that do both. They work on election day in their own precinct, and they also do come and work for us. Sometimes they serve voters at our service center in Apple Valley, at our service center in West St. Paul, and at our service center in Hastings. And I just noticed a typo. I think I was thinking of Apple Valley here, but anyway, this is our web address for the Dakota County website. I really would love for any or all of you, frankly, to come or spread the good word, and please come be an election judge for us. There are things like, again, working on our ballot board, but there are things like administering absentee voting. There's data entry, answering voter questions, all these sorts of really exciting things. It's a great way to get involved. And that is what I had prepared for as far as my presentation. I'm seeing some questions in the chat, and if there is time, I'm happy to entertain any of those questions. Well, I will say the first question that I see is, does the state or the county do ads to strengthen voter confidence in mail ballots? No, there is not a concerted advertising effort to increase voter confidence. That is a great idea. It's up to the municipality to make that decision, and so yeah, a lot of times what we see is they make that decision whether or not to go for by mail voting. So it's a good question. And I'm happy, I think that was all the questions that I saw in the chat, but I'm happy to entertain any other questions if we have time, and if not,
Yeah, if anybody has a last minute question or two, we still have time. We're lucky to have Michelle here to pick her brain and get all our questions answered.
What was your experience with ranked choice voting, and would you recommend it to be expanded into parts of Minnesota, the county, the state?
Yeah, so I am not a big proponent of ranked choice voting. There's a few reasons. I feel like it took me, I mean, I've administered several elections, and it still took me a long time to wrap my head around. And I was like, my goodness, if I do this all day, every day, and it still confuses me, how does the average voter feel? I don't like things that disenfranchise voters. We also are in I feel like the scenario that we have right now, we need to make things as simple as possible for people to understand that elections are secure, that they are safe. I think now is not the time where the national dialogue is to start making things more complex, more convoluted. I will say that I saw, in my experience, I saw a wide variety of people who loved it and embraced it, and people who didn't know as much, who didn't take advantage of their options when they could rank multiple candidates. And when they do that, when they don't rank the candidates they're eligible to rank, that effectively disenfranchises them. It can take away their choices. I have to say it's something I'm pretty wary of, and I'm not a proponent of it just because of the amount of voter confusion that it causes, and I just don't want to add any complexity. It's already a system that we spend a lot of time trying to show people how secure our voter rolls are and how secure voting equipment is, and I don't want to have to also add, and let me tell you how ranked choice elections work. So.
Do we have any other questions, or we can thank Michelle for being here tonight and us getting to know you and you getting to know us. And, hopefully you can reach out to us in the future if we can do anything to help you. I know a lot of our members are election judges already. And I will agree with you, the coolest thing is being able to sign on the poll pad now.